The quiet street in North Seattle was not what Ethan Miller expected when he packed his life into 2 suitcases and moved across the country. He had come from a busy lifestyle in Boston, endless meetings, tight deadlines, and the heavy pressure of a job that never seemed to end. He wanted silence, stability, a place where life didn't feel like a sprint he was losing. What he did not expect was that the most surprising, most memorable part of his new life would be his neighbor. Her name was Linda Carter. She lived in the house directly across the driveway, older, charming home with warm lights in the windows and a garden, so carefully tended that it looked like something from a small-town magazine. Ethan first saw her on the morning after he moved in. He was carrying boxes from his car, struggling because he had underestimated their weight. His arms were shaking when he heard a voice behind him. "You need a hand with that," a woman called out. He turned, expecting someone around his age, maybe a friendly neighbor with nothing else to do. But instead, he saw her Linda, about 55, with light brown hair tied in a loose ponytail and bright, lively eyes. She wore simple jeans and a soft gray sweater. But what stood out the most was her posture. Straight, confident, energetic. She carried a small watering can in one hand, as if she had just stepped away from her garden. Ethan tried to smile through the awkwardness of being caught struggling. Yeah, maybe. This one doesn't want to cooperate. Before he could say more, she put down her watering can, walked over, and lifted the other side of the box with surprising ease. Together, they carried it up the steps and inside. "You're stronger than you look," Ethan said. "And you underestimated that box," she teased lightly. "I'm Linda. I live right there. If you need anything, tools, help, or just directions to the nearest grocery store, I'm around." That was the moment Ethan realized something strange. She had a presence that made the air feel different. He wasn't used to that. In Boston, people barely made eye contact. Here, a woman he didn't know had offered help. Warmth and conversation, all within 5 minutes. When she walked back toward her garden, he found himself watching her steady steps, her relaxed smile, the calm confidence she carried without trying. He told himself he was only observing the neighborhood, adjusting to his surroundings, nothing more. But something deeper had been sparked. Days passed quickly as Ethan settled into his new home and new routines. He worked remotely now, so his mornings were quiet coffee, emails, and long breaks where he stared out the window, letting his thoughts wander. Every now and then, he would see Linda outside. She was always doing something, trimming roses, sweeping fallen leaves, carrying heavy bags as if they were nothing, or jogging past his house in the early morning dogging, at 55 with more energy than people half her age. He didn't know why, but it impressed him more than he wanted to admit. One afternoon, Ethan walked out to get his mail when he nearly collided with her. Linda laughed as he apologized. "No worries," she said. "I should watch where I'm going instead of thinking about plant fertilizer." Ethan smiled awkwardly. "Is the garden a lot of work?" "Only if you care about it," she replied. "But caring makes it worth it." Her answer stayed with him strangely. Caring makes it worth it. He didn't know why it hit him the way it did. Maybe because he had spent years caring about the wrong things. Numbers, deadlines, people who barely remembered his name. Linda, on the other hand, seemed to care about life itself. Later that week, a sudden windstorm blew through the neighborhood. Branches shook, leaves swirled everywhere, and a loud noise made Ethan rush outside. One of Linda's wooden planters had spilled over, dirt scattered on the driveway. Before he could offer help, she ran out of her house with a broom. Moving faster than he expected, seeing her rushing around with sleeves rolled up, hair messy from the wind, and yet still somehow smiling, it made Ethan pause. "You don't have to do that alone," he said as he grabbed a second broom from his garage. "You're sweet," she replied, "but I'm used to doing things on my own." "Maybe you don't have to be," he murmured before he could stop himself. Linda looked at him for a second, surprised not in a shocked way, but in a way that suggested she wasn't used to people offering support. She nodded softly, and they cleaned up the mess together. By the time they finished, the wind had calmed. "Thank you, Ethan," she said. "You're settling in well. Still learning," he admitted. "But this place, it's growing on me." "Seattle does that," she said. "People think it's all rain and gray skies, but there's a lot of life here if you know where to look." Her words were simple, but they felt heavier than that, as if she was talking about more than weather. From that moment, something between them shifted subtly, quietly, but enough that Ethan felt a little spark of anticipation whenever he stepped outside. He didn't pursue anything, and he never crossed any boundaries. But he liked talking to her. He liked the feeling he got when she smiled at him. And sometimes when he saw her walking across her porch in the evening light, he felt a warmth he hadn't felt in years. The next Sunday morning, Ethan was carrying a large wooden shelf into his house, and the thing nearly slipped out of his hands. Linda came out instantly. "You're going to drop that?" she said. "I'm trying not to," he grunted. She stepped beside him and took the other end. "Lift on 3. 1, 2. Before he could react, she lifted with surprising strength, and together they got the shelf through the door. Ethan leaned against the wall, out of breath. "Okay," he said. "You're officially stronger than me." Linda laughed. "It's not strength. I just stay active. It keeps me sane." "Active is an understatement," Ethan joked. "You're more energetic than I am." She shrugged with a playful grin. "Age is just a number. Energy is a choice." The simplicity of her statement made him pause again. She didn't say it with pride or arrogance. She said it like someone who had learned something through life, something she kept close to her heart. Ethan found himself wanting to know more about her, but he didn't ask. Something about Linda made him careful, respectful. The connection was fragile, new, and he didn't want to push his luck. But the thought lingered. What made her so alive? What kept her going? A few days later, Ethan stepped outside to throw away some boxes and saw Linda adjusting a ladder against the side of her house. He froze, watching her climb a few steps to fix a loose piece of trim. "You shouldn't be up there alone," Ethel said as he walked over. She looked down. "It's just a quick fix." "That's how most accidents happen," he replied. She rolled her eyes with a smile but climbed down anyway. "Fine, you do it. But if you break your neck, I'm not responsible." Ethan fixed the piece quickly while she held the ladder. When he climbed down, he caught a brief softness in her expression, like she wasn't used to someone stepping in for her. "You're a good neighbor," she said. "You make it easy." He replied. Something unspoken hung in the air after that. Not romantic, not bold, but warm, comfortable, a kind of quiet understanding. That night, Ethan sat on his couch and tried to make sense of why he felt drawn to her. He wasn't looking for connection. He wasn't expecting anything. But Linda had a presence that pulled him in, the kind of energy that made an ordinary day feel brighter. Like a hidden spark waiting to be discovered. He didn't know her story. He didn't know her past. He only knew she lived with a level of energy and kindness that made him want to be near her. But Linda, she seemed to hold back sometimes, like she wanted to say more, share more, but stopped herself. As if she carried memories she wasn't ready to reveal. Ethan sensed it, and he knew without understanding why that her secrets, whatever they were, might change everything, and his quiet life was about to become anything but quiet. The quiet rhythm of the neighborhood had settled into a kind of routine for Ethan. Mornings were calm, afternoons productive, and evenings usually spent alone, unwinding after work. But something about that Sunday evening changed everything. He had returned from the grocery store carrying a few bags of fresh vegetables and a loaf of bread. When soft music drifted from Linda's backyard, it was subtle, gentle, the kind of music that made people slow down. That made hearts ache for something they weren't sure they were missing. Curiosity pulled him closer. He peeked through the side gate and saw Linda arranging string lights along the edge of her patio. The garden, which had always seemed alive and colorful, now glowed under the warm light of the setting sun. Linda herself seemed to glow as well, her movements graceful and effortless. She didn't notice him at first, but when she did, she smiled warmly. "Ethan," She called, her voice soft but inviting. "Come help me for a second." Hesitated, suddenly aware that stepping into her yard might seem forward. But her eyes held a kind of openness that was hard to resist. He walked over, carrying the last bag of groceries, and Linda handed him the end of a string of lights. Together, they worked to stretch it along the patio railing. Their hands brushed occasionally, sending small sparks of awareness between them, though neither said anything about it. "Thank you for helping," Linda said finally, stepping back to look at their work. "It looks better than I imagined." "You're welcome," Ethan replied. He paused, glancing at her. "This place, it really is beautiful. Just like you make it feel." Linda's cheeks flushed slightly, and she looked away to adjust a lamp on the patio. "It's silly, I know," she said quietly. "I like making the backyard feel magical, even if no one else sees it." "It's not silly at all," Ethan said. "It's nice, peaceful." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The music continued softly in the background, the wind stirred the leaves, and the sky turned shades of orange and pink. The air was full of something delicate, almost tangible, a connection neither of them had expected. Yet both could feel. Linda took a deep breath and said softly, "You know, people assume that once you reach a certain age, life slows down. But it doesn't have to. I refuse to stop living just because the world expects it." Ethan looked at her, noticing the sincerity in her tone. "I don't think you're slowing down at all," he said. "You're alive. More than most people I know." Linda smiled, but it was different now, a little softer, a little more vulnerable. She looked away, her eyes catching the last rays of the sun. "I've been alone for a long time," she admitted. "Sometimes I forget what it feels like to be truly seen." "But you're different." Ethan's heart tightened at her words. He wanted to say something, anything, but he didn't want to push. Instead, he nodded. "You're not alone tonight," he said. Her eyes met his for a brief moment, full of emotion. Gratitude, surprise, maybe a flicker of hope. Then, as if realizing the intensity of the moment, she stepped back to fix a strand of lights that had come loose in the wind. Ethan watched her, feeling the warmth of being near someone who understood more than words could express. He didn't move closer. He didn't cross any line. But the connection, the quiet, profound awareness of each other, hung between them. Impossible to ignore. When the lights were finally in place, Linda turned back to him, a hint of a smile on her face. "Would you join me for dinner sometime?" she asked, her voice gentle. "Nothing romantic, just good company." Ethan's chest lifted, a mix of excitement and relief washing over him. "I'd like that," he said. But even as he said it, he sensed that this dinner might become more than just companionship. There was a subtle pull between them, something neither could define but both could feel. Over the next few days, Ethan found himself thinking about Linda more than he had expected. Her energy, her warmth, the way she carried herself was magnetic. And yet he also sensed layers beneath her bright exterior. There were stories, memories, and experiences she didn't share. And he wondered if she ever felt lonely behind her smile. When the day of dinner arrived, Ethan felt both nervous and excited. He carried a small bouquet of flowers, unsure if it was too much, too formal. Linda opened the door, wearing a simple blouse and jeans, her hair loose and natural. Her smile, soft and welcoming, made him instantly relax. "You didn't have to bring flowers," she said, laughing lightly. "But thank you." "That's sweet." "They're for the table," Ethan said, setting them down. "Not for you unless you want them." She shook her head, still smiling. "You're funny. Come in." The evening was simple but perfect. They cooked together, Linda guiding Ethan through a few dishes she loved. Laughing at his mistakes, teasing him gently when he overcooked pasta or spilled sauce. They talked about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, favorite books, movies, work, dreams. The conversation flowed easily, as if they had known each other for years. As the night wore on, the world outside seemed to disappear. The music from her living room filled the space, mingling with the smell of fresh food and the warmth of laughter. Ethan noticed the subtle lines on Linda's face, signs of a life lived fully, and he admired them. There was wisdom there, beauty in experience, and an undeniable energy that didn't fade with age. When they finally sat down to eat, Ethan looked across the table at her. "You know," he said, hesitating slightly, "I've met a lot of people in my life, but I haven't met anyone like you." Linda's eyes softened and she reached for her glass of wine. "And you're not like anyone I've met either," she admitted. "It's strange, isn't it? How some people come into your life and just shift everything without even trying." Ethan nodded. "Yeah, strange, but good strange." They finished dinner, and afterward Linda suggested they sit in the backyard with the string lights glowing above them. The air was cool but comfortable, carrying the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass. They sat in silence for a few moments, just enjoying each other's presence. "You make it easy to forget about everything else," Ethan said quietly. Linda glanced at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she smiled softly. "I'm glad. That's all I ever wanted, someone who can just be present, without judgment, without expectation." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He realized how rare that was, to find someone who made him feel seen, truly seen, without pretense. He wanted to say more, to tell her that he felt something deeper, something that might be love or longing or just a connection he couldn't name. But he held back, respecting the fragile trust between them. The night ended with a quiet walk to the gate. Ethan hesitated, unsure if he should linger or say more. Linda looked at him, her eyes warm and inviting. "Thank you," she said simply. "For tonight, for everything." "You don't need to thank me," Ethan said, his voice soft. "I should be the one thanking you." She laughed lightly, and for a moment the distance between them felt smaller than it had ever been. Then she stepped back, turning toward her house, and he walked home, carrying a heart full of emotions he wasn't ready to define. That night, Ethan lay awake thinking about Linda, the way she moved, the way she smiled, the way she seemed to carry life itself in her energy. He knew one thing for certain: his life had changed. Something new, something alive, had entered it, and he didn't want it to leave Linda. Meanwhile, stood by her window, looking at the lights she had strung in the backyard. She thought about Ethan, about the warmth he brought into her space, about the quiet understanding he seemed to have without needing to ask questions. She had been cautious for years, careful with her heart. But Ethan had a way of breaking down walls without force, with simple presence. Both of them felt it, the gentle pull of something more than friendship. Something neither wanted to name yet, but something that promised hope, connection, and perhaps even love. And in the quiet of that Seattle night, with lights glowing softly and music lingering in the air, they both realized that their lives had intersected in a way that neither could have predicted. Something new was beginning, something exciting, something that might change everything. Ethan didn't know how far it would go. Linda didn't know if she was ready. But they both felt the spark, the energy, the undeniable sense that life had more to offer than they had dared to hope. And for the first time in a long time, they both felt truly alive.